Hey everybody, welcome back. Hope everybody had a great weekend, and hope the weather was obeyed itself for you guys and wasn't too bad wherever you live. Uh, just a thought. This is just a thought. Something I think is worth taking a gander at, so to speak. What if scenario? Okay, what if rule of law is already gone? Okay, SHTF's already happened. We're in an area and times where smaller gangs of people or whatever, they're the ones, who have whatever they consider to be the rule of law, their rule of law. All right. But what would the situation be like if all the law enforcement, say in a county or maybe even a state, all got together and went to some of these major prisons and of course let all the prisoners out, but all the law enforcement, we're talking sheriffs and police and state stuff like that, brought their families and everything and all their food supplies and everything they need, food, water, medicines, ammo, all the things they can carry because they're law enforcement, and went into these prisons and turned them into a so-called castle, because that's what they would be, like the movie The Last Castle, that was done in Tennessee. Massive state prison. Uh, the walls, they kind of called it. It looked like a castle. And a lot of these ones in the States that are these big ones, they look like castles. So if you turn loose all the prisoners and just let them go, get them out, and then all the law enforcement, and they all go in there, they have their families, and they're inside these walls and they're protected. They're no longer protecting anybody elsewhere because the rule of law is gone. Would you go there possibly, and maybe if you needed it, would you try to seek out help from them? Was a big question. Would they help you? Would they even care if you were there? We're talking the rule of law is gone. It's kind of like every man for themselves. So all the law enforcement all got together, went to these big prisons, pushed out all the bad guys. They stayed in, and now they have a castle, a major fortress into which they can live in, live out whatever time they need, keep the bad people out, keep everybody out for that matter. So just think about how that would be. That would be the only place you could go where there would actually be cops, police officers, state, stuff like that, although they would no longer be working in the capacity of that. That might be the only place, though, inside there that has some resemblance, of the rule of law. It would be their rule of law. And then would they seek out areas around their castle, little hamlets, little subdivisions and stuff like that, and maybe bring them in and under their protection and have their own little kingdom set up? It's food for thought. Just kind of wanted you to think about, a scenario like that, because, every state has, a major prison system. They do. Everyone has at least one or two major big houses. And of course, if those big houses get turned into castles, which is what they would technically be, would they be a place to go or maybe seek help? Would you even go there to seek help? What would happen if you did? It's just food for thought. I'm just wondering, because all those bad people, all those criminals, they're going somewhere. And so they're probably coming in your neighborhood. Will you have enough people to support you if they do come to your neighborhood? Because they're going to come in groups of, I don't know, 10, 20, 50, maybe 100. Who knows? Can you withstand that? Would you be able to withstand that? Would you try to negotiate with them if they did something like that? Join them even. Would you try to join them and live under, their particular rule of law, which is probably maybe nothing like your normal rule of law would be? So it's just food for thought. What would you do in those kind of crisis scenarios? How would you, protect yourselves, your loved ones, families, friends, stuff like that? If you lived in a small community, a subdivision, and you're only talking maybe one house and a couple of neighbors' houses all binding together, maybe a short street, maybe they bind together. But can that many people, maybe 30 people who have these, sticking together against a mob of 200? Just think about that. Just think about that. If you lived out and you had a small farm or even a larger farm, and say you had a lot of people out there who's going to be with you. Uh, they may be called upon, and you may have to defend them, against a mob of people, so, and maybe that mob of people are prisoners who are, they're hardcore, so just food for thought. Just wanted you to think about that. All the law enforcement all gathering together in a prison system, a large castle now, and that's where, the only sentiment of law enforcement would ever be, because that's where they all went. Because, hey, let's face it, the rule of law, as far as the national rule of law, gone. The national rule of law, out of here. So, and that can happen. People say that can never ever happen, but hey, it can happen even in you know, uh, like a Civil War 2.0. That can happen that way too. So just saying, food for thought. We've already seen here what recently. I've got a little new video down here where I keep my videos from Glenn Beck, and it is well worth a read, because they're already saying when the opposing side takes power, they're coming after law enforcement who are doing their job, and others who supported them and stuff like that. They said, when we get power, we're coming after you. Now that's not a republic anymore. That's not America. But just saying, got to be ready for this kind of stuff. And that's just all I'm suggesting on this video is just be prepared, because that's the time when you definitely need your long-term and short-term storable food as much as possible, and as many people you can get together and fully trust to defend it. All right? That's those kind of times that you would need all that. And I'm just saying it could be sooner than later. That's all I'm saying. So, all right then. Hey, look, until next time, nothing but love for you guys. I truly mean it. Thanks a lot for stopping by. Keep this in mind. Keep this in mind. If you get a chance, look at that Glenn Beck video. It's like 13 minutes or something like that. It is well worth a view. If you haven't seen it already, it's well worth the view. So, all right then. Be good, be careful, be safe, and we'll talk to you later.